us today. God, in these past months, we have felt a sense of resurrection, yet we still have so many questions. Remind us today of your love and presence with us, even in our doubting of the goodness and care you have always shown to us. Amen. So before we dive in to the sermon, I wanted us to hear a section of our passage again. And so we begin at verse 37. A great windstorm arose, and waves beat into the boat, so that the boat was already being swamped. But Jesus was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him up and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" Why, God? What is the meaning of this? Do you not care? I know I've asked these questions many times. And in this semester, as a chaplain student, I visited with many asking these same questions about the heartache in their own stories and the storms in their own lives. From a patient asking right before her life-threatening surgery, why God let her be assaulted at 12, and she was now 65, to the man I visited with for weeks, wondering why God allowed his leg to get to the point of amputation. God, do you not care? I'm sure there are many of you in this room who have asked similar questions. When the diagnosis comes, or the family member dies too young, or a car accident ruins lives. I don't know the answers, and often, if I did try to give answers, I would be overshadowing the pain of the moment with pithy, shallow comments. But in the midst of the heartache and in the continued mysteries of God, one thing I do know, God always has and always will be big enough for our questions. And for many of us, this feels uneasy. We want answers. We want an answer to give the hurting one sitting next to us. We want clarity in our own faith journeys. We want our walk with God to have all the loose ends tied up with pretty little bows. Then we come across passages like ours this morning, and the disciples ask our question: do you not care? Like, seriously, Jesus, how are you getting some shut-eye right now? Our boat is nearly falling apart. Are you ignoring me, God? My life, this family, is nearly falling apart. You can almost imagine the sigh of Jesus. The disciples running up to him panicked, and Jesus in his half-asleep stupor, nearly rolling his eyes. The moment of silence as Jesus begins to get up and yells out into the ocean, "Peace." The dead calm after effect, including the disciples gaping wide, open mouths of surprise. Jesus, God incarnated, was big enough for their question. If we hold this story of Jesus calming the sea side by side with much of the Old Testament understanding about the sea being the place of chaos, we are brought into the disciples' awe. Genesis tells us that the sea was a place of sea monsters. The waters were untamed. They could decide to rise and cover the earth at any moment. We know from Jonah that sailors fear the sea, and it was no different for Jesus' disciples, these fishermen, on this stormy night. That storm, like Back to the Future Doc, preparing for a lightning bolt to hit, like Dorothy's bad dream about the tornado, and like many of our lives, we face the ups and downs of the waves and the tension. Like Jonah, the disciples may have been wondering, does somebody need to get thrown overboard? Or like many ancient Near Eastern fables, is there going to be a giant sea creature coming to get them? One thing after another going through the disciples' minds, and their racing thoughts echo our racing thoughts of the past 15 months. And as I think more about the disciples today, I can't help but wonder, how long did it take them to yell at Jesus? Surely he'll wake up, they think. No one can sleep through this. Panicked whispers to each other, why isn't he doing anything? We need all the help we can get on this boat right now, and he's just there snoozing. Okay, then. I wonder, were the disciples assuming that because they were with this great and powerful teacher, nothing bad would happen to them? Like many Christians today, did they assume life would all go smoothly because they were following Jesus? Yet here this group is, their boat being tossed around by the all too frequent squalls on the Sea of Galilee. And even though Jesus is with them, danger is imminent. In anger, they finally burst out, do you not care? And Jesus, not scorning them for their question, not shaming them for their questioning, simply yet sorrowfully replies, haven't you yet seen enough to know you can trust me? You may not fully know who I am, but man, y'all have already walked through a lot with me. Jesus was big enough for their question, but it didn't end there. Jesus showed that he cared. Jesus was also powerful enough to calm the storm. Now, I'm not going to stand up here this morning and say that God will calm all the storms in your life if you're a faithful follower, because let's be honest, that's health, wealth, and prosperity heresy. Sometimes we won't see what God is doing in our stormy situations until later on, after our time on earth, if ever. But now that that is to the side, let us go back again to put ourselves with the disciples. The Psalms tell us again and again that only God had power over the sea. And at this moment, we're only 4 chapters into the grand narrative. At this moment, the disciples haven't yet grasped the fullness of who Jesus is, and they really won't until after the resurrection. And so here we are, early on in the story. The disciples have gotten glimpses of Jesus' power. They've seen his teaching, his compassion for people, and now they're experiencing it for themselves. On this boat ride to hell, and in the midst of the storm, the disciples get a glimpse of what it means to trust in and follow this teacher in the midst of the world's chaos. At that moment in the boat, it must have felt like the disciples' world as they knew it was ending, and that they were facing death. After choosing to leave their families and their homes at just the beginning of their grand adventure, they are overtaken by fear. And God was big enough to embrace their fear and big enough for their question. So as we draw to a close, I have 3 things for us to ponder. The first is for our own lives. We must remember the context in which this is being written. Again, the sea was the representation of chaos and the unknown. Cosmic forces were at work in the sea, so at its base, this text is an apocalyptic one, a reminder that we can carry on in hope, knowing that even as we live in the now but not yet of this world, we can cling to the one who has power over the shared forces that threaten to upend us all. The second is our lived out theology, how we interact in faith with the world around us. Jesus didn't try to explain away or minimize the fear that the disciples had. His immediate response to his disciples' questioning wasn't shock or anger or a lecture of how we shouldn't question the ways of God. Jesus responded with action. Now, we cannot often fix all the suffering in the world around us, But when the hurting are sitting next to us, our listening is an action. Our working for justice is an action. And our prayers can be followed up with compassionate care. The one questioning must navigate through that journey, that we can support them along the way and continue to point them to Jesus, the one who in compassion responded, "Hey, remember the ways you can trust me." And finally, the third is a summation, how we understand suffering and our faith. As Claire mentioned, especially in the past 15 months, we have seen all too much of what the world can throw at us. I know I have, and in the heartache I've seen in the chaplaincy work I've done, I also preach this to myself this morning. What do we do when we are on the sea and the world is tossing us back and forth in the boat so named life? When we look out and all we see is cosmic chaos and we cannot make sense of the evil around us? Well, the disciples had one thing going for them. They turned to Jesus. Even if their turning to him was based in questioning, it was still Jesus they went towards. So in the midst of cosmic chaos, may we turn to Jesus in hope, knowing that there is still more to the story, remembering the miraculous ways that he has shown up before and is, in fact, still with us in the midst of everything. Amen.